Hello and welcome to another TLDR US video. Last week we discussed the mess that was the Iowa caucus, and when we made that video it still wasn't clear who the winner of the vote was. The second round of voting in the Democratic Primary process has now concluded in New Hampshire, so we're going to tell you all about it, as well as updating you on what happened in Iowa since our last video. If you're enjoying our US content, please consider supporting us on Patreon. We can only put a certain amount of time into this channel, and with your support, we can increase the number of videos we put out. If you want to support the channel and get perks including voting on video topics, early access to some of our videos, and a super exclusive US pin badge, then check out our Patreon page. There's a link to that down below. Okay, so let's get started by taking a look at what happened in Iowa since our last video on Wednesday. If you don't know what's been going on, or you don't understand the primary process, go and watch the video we made on the Iowa caucuses. Trust us, you want the context. Despite major delays and technical problems, all of the votes have now officially been counted in Iowa, and delegates have been awarded accordingly. As happy as some may be to at long last have the official results, there is still some contention about who the true winner is. This is because there are two measures of success in Iowa: vote total and delegate total. In prior elections, vote totals weren't released to the public, but in an effort to be more transparent, the Iowa Democratic Party decided to release the vote totals along with the normal delegate counts this year. Though this does increase transparency, it also means that one candidate could win the most votes and a different candidate could win the most delegates, essentially creating two winners. And surprise surprise, that's exactly what happened. As our fans were keen to point out in last week's video, Senator Burnie Sanders left Iowa with the highest number of votes, with Politico reporting his total supporters as around 46,000. Sanders was pretty closely followed by Buttigieg, who garnered around 43,000 votes. Warren got about 35,000, followed by Joe Biden, who was approaching 24,000, and Amy Klobuchar with about 21,000. The reverse was true when it came to national delegate counts. Iowa has 41 pledged delegates that are allocated by precinct. It's basically like a mini electoral college, in which delegates are determined by 2,000 local mini-elections, not an overall vote total. And while no one won a majority in these districts, Buttigieg got a plurality, gaining 14 of them. Sanders was close behind with 12, followed by Elizabeth Warren with 8, Joe Biden with 6, and Amy Klobuchar with 1. Basically, Buttigieg's supporters were more spread out, so he won more delegates, while Sanders had a higher voter turnout in the precincts he won. So this kind of gave us two winners for two different reasons, with Buttigieg ahead when it comes to the important delegate count, and Sanders scooping up a larger proportion of votes. This should have been incredibly helpful for both campaigns, especially Mayor Pete, who could have expected a major boost from winning the delegate count, despite low polling across the country. In a normal caucus, this would have led to a fairly significant boost for Buttigieg, with his campaign gaining a huge amount of media attention and momentum. However, the chaos that surrounded Iowa, the failed app, and the controversial early declaration of victory all worked to minimise the impact of Iowa. Instead of providing the winner, or in this case winners, with a major boost as you'd expect out of Iowa, so much media attention was focused on the chaos that neither Sanders nor Buttigieg got the benefits from winning that they might have hoped for. This would surely be disappointing for both candidates, but as an underdog, Buttigieg could really have done with the boost that Iowa has historically provided. That being said, it wasn't a complete disaster for Pete, with polling showing a bump for the former mayor after Iowa, although later polling has suggested it faded away in the following days. The candidate who the chaos really did help was Joe Biden. Going into the Iowa caucus, lots of people were predicting that it would be difficult for Biden, but the results were far worse than anyone could have expected. In fact, it even seemed to take his team by surprise, with his staff saying before the caucus that he should reach viability in 90 to 95% of precincts, a number that ended up being far too optimistic. No matter how you spin it, Iowa was a rough night for Biden, something that he even acknowledged in the Democratic debate later in the week. But the chaos likely helped him, distracting people from the difficulties Biden had in the state. Sorry to spend so much time in a New Hampshire video talking about Iowa, but that discussion is super important when setting the stage for the second vote. Given the inconclusive nature of the double winners and the distraction of the chaos on caucus night, New Hampshire takes on a new status. It might not officially be the start of the primary process, but its winner can expect the first clean media cycle about their success. So, with that said, let's dive into what happened in the nation's first primary. Before we dive too deep into the results, it's worth keeping in mind that unlike Iowa, New Hampshire uses a primary system. This means that voters cast their votes with a normal ballot. There's no standing around in school gyms and walking about like in Iowa. You just cast your votes like you normally would. Dixville Notch is a town in northern New Hampshire that, according to the 2010 census, has a population of 10. Yes, you heard that correctly. 10. At midnight, the residents of this small town gather in a local hotel to cast and count their votes. In fact, due to the small number of voters, polls in Dixville Notch are only open for a very short amount of time, closing sometimes only a minute after they open. This year's Dixville Notch primary was particularly interesting. There were only 5 registered voters, and despite not being a Republican, Michael Bloomberg received the only vote in the Republican primary in the form of a write-in vote. Also, despite having never campaigned there, he also won the Democratic primary in the town, with 3 votes, while the remaining 2 votes were split between Senator Sanders and Mayor Buttigieg. Now you might be wondering why we went into so much detail about Dixville Notch's 5 voters. Well, Dixville Notch has often been used as a measure of what to expect across the state in the New Hampshire primary. However, this time, it wasn't an accurate predictor. Though that's not all surprising when their winner, Bloomberg, wasn't even on the ballots in New Hampshire. At the time of writing, according to the Real Clear Politics average, in New Hampshire leading up to the primary, Bernie enjoyed a lead in the polls of 28.7%, followed by Buttigieg at 21.3%, Klobuchar at 11.1%, and Warren and Biden were tied for 4th at 11%. It's worth noting here that Sanders won the New Hampshire primary in 2016, with over 60% of the vote. Given his history in the state and the polling, it's unsurprising that with 87% reporting, Sanders won the state yet again, with around 26% of the vote. Buttigieg in second with 24%, followed by Klobuchar in third with 20%, Warren in 4th with 9%, and Biden in 5th with 8%. There was also another event of note on Tuesday night. Businessman Andrew Yang suspended his campaign after a disappointing finish in New Hampshire and a failure to gain traction beyond his core following. Michael Bennet also ended his campaign on Tuesday, but given that his polling average was near 0, that's a less surprising turn of events. So what does this all mean moving forward? Let's talk about the losers, the winners, and how important this all is. First off then, the losers. Obviously, Yang and Bennett both dropped out of the race, and you can expect more candidates to drop out as the primary contests proceed, and the Democratic Party gets closer to deciding on its nominee. It's also worth noting that Joe Biden had a very disappointing showing in New Hampshire, even going so far as cancelling an event he was scheduled to have in the state, and instead heading straight to South Carolina. His weak performance in Iowa and New Hampshire could spell trouble for his campaign moving forward, although looking at the demographics of Nevada and South Carolina, he can expect to do better in both of the upcoming, more diverse states. That being said, looking at Real Clear Politics' polling, in the aftermath of New Hampshire and Iowa, Biden's polling has fallen from 29.5% to 19.2%, putting him in second place behind Sanders. Secondly, the winners. After an arguably first place finish in Iowa and a first and second place in New Hampshire for Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg respectively, momentum is clearly on their side. The question then becomes if they can maintain that momentum going into Nevada and South Carolina. Buttigieg will be especially interesting to watch as he heads into 2 far more diverse states, considering that support with non-white ethnic groups has been a real problem for him historically. Tuesday was a huge win for Klobuchar, who came in 3rd place, quite an improvement over her 5th place finish in Iowa, which already was widely considered a success. It could also indicate some momentum for her heading into the Nevada caucuses on February 22nd. Thirdly, on the significance of it all. As we've mentioned before, Bernie Sanders beat Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire in 2016, and while Sanders has had quite a bit of success thus far, it's worth noting that Hillary Clinton went on to beat Sanders in Nevada and South Carolina, and then became the nominee. So I guess what we're saying is that there's still a long time to go, and that democracy is ultimately unpredictable. Some Democrats have worried about the influence of both Iowa and New Hampshire, on the basis that they don't accurately reflect the party. as minority voters are a growing demographic within the Democratic Party, and both states have majority white populations. Some within the party, including presidential candidate Julian Castro, believe that states with a more diverse population should replace Iowa and New Hampshire as the first states to cast their votes for an increasingly diverse party. In fact, Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez, after the chaos that was Iowa, called for a re-examination of the primary process within the Democratic Party, and said that the party would review it after the November election. So maybe Iowa and New Hampshire will lose their titles as the first caucus and primary in the nation. And while the main topic of both Iowa and New Hampshire has been the Democratic Party, there have also been Republican primaries happening as well. Now, it's quite obvious that Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee, and we're not pointing that out for no reason at all. Trump's performance in his own primaries may foretell his performance in November. In Iowa, for example, Donald Trump garnered more votes than Barack Obama during his 2012 re-election campaign, and Obama will go on to carry the swing state in the general election. So this could be an indicator for the turnout that Trump can expect in November. As always, we'll keep you up to date on what happens as the primaries progress, so be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a video.